All right. Hello, everybody. Hope you all are doing well. This is DFS Army's tournament strategy show where we'll look back at last night, game plan for today's five gamer. We'll talk through injury news, potential leverage plays, potential core plays, the usual. We're far enough in the season where I don't think there's new people watching, so we don't need to talk about all that. But we can look at last night's slate. I wasn't able to find the 50K winning lineup from last night, but I do have the highest score I saw, which was 354.75. It had Emmanuel Quickly, who we forced exposure to on the pre-lock show, so that went well. Personally, I didn't have a great night last night. I didn't have enough of the Memphis guys, and I had too much Samu Mamu from the Spurs. But Tyler Hero made this line. We forced exposure to him. Jake LaRavia was someone that we had exposure to, but I didn't force it. And so I think I ended up being close to field weight or under the field on him. I don't remember. Stevens is someone else that we had exposure to, but I didn't force the issue there of them going up against Cleveland. So I think I still ended up being under the field on him. Williams started for Toronto. Once we saw that, we knew to force him in. So we did that on the pre-lock show. Lillard was someone that we had plenty of exposure to. Bobby Portis made this line. We also forced exposure to him once we got that news for the Bucks. And then Zach Collins also made the line as well, and he was a core play. So one of those nights could have been better, but we weren't so far off where I had any major regrets. I just wish I had more of the Grizzlies and less of Malmu. But today's slate, let's get back on it. We have the Chicago Bulls. Well, first let's look at the slate in general. There's only a few games that actually matter when it comes to standings and who makes the playoffs and just seeding. The Knicks are still trying to take the second seed, so this game matters a little bit for them. Doesn't matter much for the Celtics. For the Rockets or Jazz, nothing matters for them. They have nothing to play for. Pelicans, not too much to play for. Kings are still trying to hold on to that last spot for the playoffs, so they are trying to win here. Warriors can still have some seeding reasons to play, but they're going to be in the play-in tournament no matter what. And then Portland, of course, has nothing to play for. Let me know if I'm wrong on any of that. I think that's right. But let's go ahead and jump into the games. We have the Bulls going up against the Pistons. Again, the Bulls don't have a lot to play for, but they have an extremely soft matchup. And so just assuming these guys are going to go out there and play the way they should as professionals, this is a spot you kind of want to load up on. The total's not that high because the Bulls play at such a slow pace, but the matchup's fantastic and the price tag's pretty decent on quite a few of these players. You can look at DeMar DeRozan at 8,100. I'm interested in seeing where his ownership falls. As of right now, he's not standing out too much for me, even though the matchup is great. I would be comfortable having a little bit of exposure. He shows up a lot naturally in the domination station in some of my early runs, so as of right now, I don't really need to force him, but he's showing up a lot. And so I don't plan on having more than 40% DeMar DeRozan by the time we get to the pre-lock show, but I'm comfortable with him showing up. Now, Nikola Vucevic, I feel like we haven't been able to play him in a while. Those of you who have been around for the last few years, I love playing Nikola Vucevic, especially if he's low owned. I doubt he'll be low owned on this slate, but right now he's one of my favorite center plays of the slate. 7,500, pretty cheap, fantastic matchup against this not no name, but really bad front court. So Vucevic is someone I want to make a priority for me on this slate. Part of what makes the Bulls a little bit more interesting than they usually are is just when it comes to injury news. Andre Drummond is doubtful, and so that should solidify Vucevic's minutes, but it wouldn't shock me if they just want to give some of their relatively newer players more minutes. So just because we're at that point in the season, just because Drummond's doubtful doesn't really solidify Vucevic for me too much. Ao Dasinumo is questionable, which could open things up a little bit here for this team, especially a play like Kobe White, who is already pretty viable. But outside of that, not too much moving pieces. So yeah, I really like Vucevic. Kobe White, I like more of Ao gets ruled out. Alex Caruso was more of a sim-model play. He stood out a little bit for me there. I need to dig a little bit deeper into it. And then Javonte Green is just a pivot option that I want to keep top of mind. Off of, who was it? We go to 4,400. Okay. So yeah, Omer Yesivin is one of the best pay up or best value plays on the slate. Javonte Green hasn't really been that great, but he's been playing decent minutes at 4,400. When we look at the sim model, we go down to 4,400. We look at Yurtsevin, 29.8% chance of hitting 8x. That's really good. And then you see Javonte Green, 22.3% chance of hitting 8x. So similar, not in all actuality, Omer really has more upside, but similar, comparable upside, similar price range. I just want to force exposure to a guy like that who should be super low owned. So not someone I'm going to have 20, 30% of, but 5 to 10% Javonte Green, especially if he's not chalky, I'm willing to take a shot on because of the sim model. For the Pistons tonight, I don't like to play players going up against the Bulls, but it is that time of year where we do need to consider every team. Cade Cunningham is questionable. Again, there's absolutely no reason for Cade Cunningham to play tonight if he's battling that knee injury. So more than likely, he'll probably be out tonight, which would give guys like Sasser and Flynn and Ivy boost. Even Duran would see a nice usage boost as well. Their price tag is what keeps them viable, but we have better value on this slate. Outside of Me Too is someone who really does stand out for me in the sim model primarily, but I do like his price tag. Not sure about ownership yet, but I have a like on him. I want to make sure I'm at least around field weight exposure. He's been playing a ton of minutes, and we know, especially if the Bulls aren't going to be playing all that tough tonight, he definitely can have a nice ceiling in a bit of a softer matchup, possibly. Let's see. Any other Pistons showing up? No, it's really just Me Too. And I'm still going back and forth on Sasser, Duran, Ivy. As of right now, I'm not going to force exposure to them, but if they're low owned enough, they could be a little sneaky. All right, next up we have the Knicks. No news here, but this is a tough matchup. We don't really know what the Celtics are going to do. This is the front end of a back-to-back for the Celtics. Right now, Tatum, Brown, Porzingis, Holiday, Horford, and Tillman are all questionable for the Celtics. And so if a few of those guys end up missing this game, the matchup becomes extremely soft for the Knicks, even though right now it appears and looks like it's a tough matchup. This game is on TNT. I think, especially when you look at Underdog and you see their notes, it looks like what most people are expecting are for the Celtics to actually play in this primetime game and then sit all their stars tomorrow. We'll see. For me, I don't try and predict the future. We'll get this news at some point. If the Celtics play, I want to be around field weight exposure to Josh Hart, mostly because of the sim model. He has some upside there. But then also I like OG Anunoby in that relatively low 5K range. He's been playing a ton of minutes. This feels like a nice bounce back spot for him. We haven't seen too much of a ceiling from him since returning from his injury, but I like this spot, and I really just like the price tag. I hope he's not too chalky. Now, if the Celtics players get ruled out, then I want to force more exposure to Brunson and DiVincenzo just because they do so much for this team that I would need some exposure there. But assuming the Celtics are going to be healthy tonight, Brunson's someone that I am comfortable seeing show up in my lines, just like DiVincenzo showing up a little bit right now. Yeah, Brunson's showing up in 38% of my lines because we don't have too many pay up options on this slate. And I'm okay with that. But again, just like DeRozan, I'm not going to force it. For the Celtics, as I mentioned, everyone's questionable. Absolutely everybody is questionable. What's up, Thomas? Hope you're doing all right. Everyone's questionable, so can't make too many decisions here yet. What I would say is that, or what I will say is that at this point in the season, for a team like the Celtics who have clinched the number 1 seed, it's not safe to play their starters at this point, even if they do get ruled in. So Tatum, Brown, Porzingis, I'm not overly excited about just because it makes no sense for them to really see too much run to really reach their ceiling. And we're not seeing any kind of discount on them. I don't hate the idea of taking shots on guys like Pritchard and Hauser just because I do think they'll try to get them a bit more involved as the season ends. Is there anyone else who could be sneaky here? Not really. But that's one of the things I like to do when we get towards the end of the season with teams that have locked up what they're doing. I don't like to get too high on their studs, but I'm okay taking some shots on more of their prospect type of players. Luke Cornett would be great or solid too if Tillman and another big like Porzingis and Horford gets ruled out. Just a few scenarios there that we can talk through in the pre-lock show. For the Rockets tonight, they are pretty healthy. They have a fantastic matchup against the Jazz. They have absolutely nothing to play for. They can't make the playoffs anymore. But assuming they're going to play the way they should be able to dominate in this matchup. And honestly, pretty much every single Rockets player is in a really good spot because it's the Jazz. Jalen Green, Fred VanVleet are the two that I'm looking to prioritize. Amen Thompson, if he's going a little overlooked on this slate, I'm looking at him as a potential leverage play, but I'm just going to wait and see on that. He's had some tough matchups. He hasn't been in great form, but we saw what he did last time against the Jazz, and it wouldn't shock me if he did that again. Jock Landale, I think there's better center plays. Cam Whitmore's okay. I never get too excited about him. Dylan Brooks. I have a like on him. Sim model likes him. Matchup's fantastic. I'm interested in seeing where the ownership is. That's truly going to be what dictates things for me. If he's seeing 25 plus in ownership, I'm not going to go higher than that. I refuse. And that's biased, just so you all know. That's just a lot of bad experiences with him. Not a high usage player, not a high points per minute player, but he's relatively cheap and he plays a lot of minutes. And has a really great matchup. Thomas said, how do you use the DS if there's no projected ownership data in terms of exposure? So for right now, it's hard. It's hard. I don't like to take things too seriously this early, but I still run it and I still like to see who's standing out pretty early on. So like I still show my exposures and I see what I have and I just base it off of what I like. But as you can see, I don't really do maxes. I don't lower anyone's exposure. This is just kind of like the rough draft, I don't take it too seriously. It's just like, okay, let's see how the slate's kind of coming together and then make adjustments as we get more news. Good question, though. All right, for the Jazz tonight, they're still missing everybody. Sexton, Clarkson, Collins, Kessler, Dunn, Markkanen. They're all done. They know their season's over. They don't want to lose any big stars. Keontae George is viable. He hasn't been great. He's 6K. Matchup's not my favorite. I don't like picking on the Rockets still, even at this point in the season. The only reason why I'm even looking at the Jazz is because of their value players and value options who see a ton of minutes. We start off with Omar Gertzoven. I am fine with him at 4,500. Again, curious to see where ownership is. I think he'll be one of the chalkier centers on this slate. THT stood out for me in the sim model. I never love a chalky THT, but at this point with the Jazz missing all the players that they are, even with him coming off the bench, I'm comfortable with it. And then Luke Samanic, we have him projected to start at 3,600, saying 30 plus minutes. Very viable value option for me on this slate. So I feel pretty comfortable with these guys. Johnny Juzang is very viable as well. He also should start here. He's showing up a good bit for me naturally. And then Darius Bazley, I don't believe he's showing up as much, but he's still showing up for me around 7%. So I have exposure to pretty much all of the Jazz. You even probably saw a little bit of Keontae George around 10%. And yeah, a ton of THT and Luka. So one of those spots where because of how cheap they are, I'm very comfortable having exposure to them. But, it's just end of season NBA. There's nothing special about it. It's just cheap players who see minutes. And then you play them. For me, I really do just like to lean on the DS and the optimizer a bit more towards the end of the season. We saw it on Wednesday. No, we saw it on Tuesday that when it's on, and like you can have some really, really great nights. And so I like to lean on it, and then I just like to focus on leverage plays, and that's really what's worked for me so far this week. For the Pelicans, no real injury news. Najee Marshall's questionable. which is a big deal if he misses this game because the Pelicans are still trying to keep that 6th seed in the playoffs. That would and should solidify the minutes for guys like Zion and Trey Murphy if he misses this game. Even probably Joe Val and Herb Jones a little bit, but I need to look a little bit closer at them. Even if he plays, though, CJ McCollum has a great matchup against the Kings here, relatively cheap at 8,300. If he's low owned, he's a potential leverage play for me on this slate. That's how much I like CJ tonight. Trey Murphy, cheap, solid minutes, no Ingram, still comfortable playing him. Want to be at least around field weight exposure there. And that's it. That's pretty much it. This is a team that I'm okay having exposure to, but they're all priced pretty appropriately, so I didn't want to go too crazy here. Zion is another guy I just want to wait and see where his ownership falls. He's been really good this season, but he's kind of started to slow down as you get closer towards the end of the season. Matchup's a little tough too here. I mean, he hasn't slowed down that much. He just had one rough game against Portland, which was just disappointing. So that's probably more biased than anything. But he had a great game against Phoenix. He did have a little bit of a slow stretch there, but those are pretty good defenses. How did he do against Sacramento earlier this season? Didn't play that one. Struggled a little bit. Yeah. Zion's just not someone I'm trying to force here. For me, it's a CJ night. It gets a little bit easier for him if Keegan Murray misses this game, but we'll see. Keegan Murray is currently listed as questionable. If Keegan Murray gets ruled out, per usual, that dramatically increases my interest in Fox. There's just been a really nice correlation there between those two when they end up missing games. And so for now, I'm not doing anything there, but if he misses, then my interest in Fox goes up a ton. And then Sabonis is one of the only pay-up options on this slate, but he's also my favorite pay-up option on this slate. So I plan on being at least a little bit over the field on him. And then let's see. Trey Lyles is just another value option that's standing out a lot. He's definitely viable, but he's not showing up too much for me yet. Yeah, only 1%. But if that increases as we get closer to the pre-lock show, I'm totally fine with it. All right. Then we have the Warriors going up against the Trailblazers. Now, the Warriors are a tough team to also talk about tonight, mostly because they have some pretty big major pieces who are questionable. Draymond Green being one of those individuals. Klay Thompson's questionable. Dario Saric is also questionable. This matters because the Warriors are, again, I talked about it at the start of the show, they still have a chance to move up a little bit when it comes to seeding for the play-in tournament. So they do still want to win this game. They should win this game, even if Draymond Green and Klay Thompson end up missing. But the key thing that we're looking at for DFS is who are we going to play? Believe it or not, Curry is a viable option at 9K. As of right now, I didn't pull the trigger, but if he's super low owned, I'm willing to take a shot. Kuminga, I like a lot more if Draymond Green misses. Klay Thompson, I like more if Draymond Green misses, but if everyone plays, I still plan on forcing exposure to him. He's been in a bit better form here lately, and I like the matchup against the Trailblazers. Tracy Jackson, once again, would boost if Green is out. And then Andrew Wiggins, I'm fine with really either way, but I like him a lot more if Klay Thompson and or Draymond Green get ruled out. So, interesting team. I'll definitely have exposure to the Warriors tonight, but we just have to wait for the injury news. Trailblazers are awful. They're a really bad team. They have nothing to play for. DeAndre Ayton's had a bad season. Decent matchup, decent price. Sim model likes him. One of the higher total games on the slate. Spread's pretty wide, so he might not see as much run as expected. That does worry me a little bit. But as long as DeAndre Ayton isn't too chalky on this slate, I do plan on making sure I have exposure to him here. Banton, similar story. Not the best play on the slate by any means, but just need exposure to him with all the guys that the Trailblazers are still missing. Jabari Walker has a little bit of upside. Not my favorite center play on the slate, but someone I want to have exposure to just because of the upside he does bring to the table. And then Scoot projects well. He was showing up by himself earlier. Yeah, around 23%. So I didn't really feel the need to force exposure to more Scoot, but he's a viable option. Do we have any Chris Murray? I think we have better value than Chris Murray today, to be honest, but let's see. Yep, he's not showing up. So yeah, that's pretty much the slate in general for me, guys. It's still early, like I said. A lot will change, so keep an eye out for the news, but we'll talk about that more so on the pre-lock and have an actual plan. That will be at 5:30 p.m. Eastern today, maybe a little bit earlier if I finish up with work and stuff. But I look forward to seeing everyone then, and if not, I'll see you all tomorrow. Have a good one, y'all. Peace out.